the fighting game community is torn. Well, we all knew that already. Any competitive video games community being torn is like any sports division being torn, having the most sincerely rabid but loyal fans. Grass is green, the sky's blue, we all understand this. You can think of any specific fighting games discourse and immediately think, this game is oversimplified, this character is too popular. You have to play the games to really be into the series. Naturally though, or somewhat unnaturally, unity persists within communities, and groups of fans aren't always starting 100-year wars with each other over these topics. As much as the community can be what sometimes becomes, there remains a strange sense of welcoming, and the community holds itself up when the time calls for it. This isn't an introspection on every single fighting games community, though. We're talking about a specific community. Oh, right. Guilty Gear. Guilty Gear is a fighting game franchise largely drawing interest from its mainline installments. It has a thorough, competitive community that boasts a slot at EVO, a fighting game event annually held in the United States and in Japan, seeking to showcase the best of the competitive scene as well as the best of the community itself. That it usually succeeds at quite well, indicative of the passion of the fans and the sheer joy that comes from hitting buttons and hitting each other. So, for a community to be so in sync, are there universal consensuses among fans that keep people from tearing into each other? Is it okay for a community to split off into niches and not have every fan be deeply into the gameplay or into the story? And are they even really niches at all, rather than varying methods of enjoying a media? It is no misconception that the Guilty Gear franchise has been received especially differently in more recent years. Whether fans believe that the glory days are past or the glory days are underway, viewpoints have generally become more dispersed over time. I don't necessarily want to investigate, but rather I want to showcase this dispersion, as well as what key features of the series bring fans closest. As such, I ran a response form and took the word of 84 applicants to dig into what makes the series so enjoyable for people, and how they interact with it as a result. To begin, indubitably, people find out about Guilty Gear in interesting ways, to say the least. Fans' expositions to the franchise could largely be summed up to friends and family, advertisements, videos and art related to the franchise, and social media. I find these methods of exposition to be important, as one method of entry into the franchise doesn't always leave two people with the same method of enjoying Guilty Gear. Furthermore, it can take the smallest, most seemingly insignificant event for people to become obsessed with something, and that's by no means unique to Guilty Gear. I will say there was a clear emphasis on what tends to stand out to fans the most: the characters in writing and in design. While not entirely an outlandish sort of appeal for the series, it's clear how individualistic each character in the series is. Characters have their own ambitions, personalities, and woes engraved all over them, down to the most minuscule details, even on their clothes. It's clear that design is just as integral to this franchise as is any other means of writing a character. Gameplay, music, and story also took strong precedence among applicants. I'd like to place emphasis on music, as it's something particularly discussed within the community. Each character has their own resplendent theme, like most fighting games, and are even given lyrics as of Guilty Gear Strive. The series also has its fair share of musical references, down to the main protagonist's favorite band being Queen, and, well, even being based off of Freddie Mercury himself, so it's no surprise that discussion and appreciation of the music is this prevalent. Music embodies personality just as much as the characters themselves do, all the more allowing people to feel like part of themselves exists in the media. And it's funny, because in the next part of the forum I asked about characters and themes that made people feel represented, but didn't realize that themes could also be read as music, rather than just literary themes. Again, there is an emphasis on characters and how they connect to the viewers. Feeling represented in this media spans across race, ethnicity, gender, and orientation. Many respondents felt that these characters had excellent execution. People similarly find themselves in characters in ways that aren't as explicit. Characters are intricately written to be universally felt by audiences, allowing fans to embed themselves into characters as their experiences align with their own. The canon does not need to be one-to-one with the viewer's circumstances to still masterfully mirror their experiences. Literary themes are also a notable feature of the franchise itself. Survival, rebuilding oneself from the past's wreckage, and finding happiness after suffering were the most recurrent answers. I think of this to be the biggest thing that drives home for the series' story, the concept of in spite. In spite of the pain, the inevitability, the wrongdoings of others and of yourself, there are ways to persevere and find a fitting means to an end. It is also obviously crucial to consider the actual gameplay of the franchise. The vast majority of applicants played at least one mainline game from the franchise and enjoyed it. Many respondents made comparisons within the franchise, often with the mention of Guilty Gear Strive, and to my surprise, it was actually more divided than I thought it would have been. There are players who value Strive's execution just as much as there are players who value the execution of older games. Mechanics and simplicity or thoroughness of gameplay were recurring reasons for one position or the other. The general consensus was that gameplay is not integral to enjoying the franchise. Even so, many players highly encourage playing the game if feasible for the sake of experiencing characters through their gameplay itself. Many respondents attest that the series can be enjoyed solely by its story and characters, and becoming skilled at the games or even playing them at all is not essential to participating in Guilty Gear. Some instead attest that at least trying a game in the franchise is essential to an adequate understanding of the series. What surprised me personally, though, was the connection of this understanding to the story rather than the competitive scene. Some respondents mentioned arcade modes and characters' animations being critical to one's enjoyment. Now, any media would have no real effect on anyone if all that offered was temporary. I'll put it short, the good news is that Guilty Gear is fair enough of a franchise to make memories, which is great, because I was horribly concerned. I joke, but it is heartwarming to see for yourself what the series has made happen, monumental or not. And monumentality is subjective, mind you. Freedom, excitement, reevaluation, empowerment? Something will end up sticking. I don't believe we can hold any media to any kind of high standard without having the heart and mind to criticize it. The primary criticisms I received mentioned Strive's simplification or server issues, the lack of opportunities to expand upon the story, or even the outright lack of quality story itself, poorly written characters embodying stereotypes or odd writing choices, not enough emphasis on side characters, and a poor ability from Arc System Works to address the community regarding imminent issues. Remediating these issues is, as I see it, the true test of this franchise. There may be some semblance of improvement that exists, and this isn't a message to be optimistic or pessimistic about what might be done about any of these issues, but my general takeaway is that there are issues that fans unify on, if at least to some extent. Guilty Gear is a game. As funny as that is to say, it is also a fiction, a medium, an experience, an array of designs and personalities, a niche. Boasting variety and how it can be enjoyed as a media is no revolutionary thing, as the same could be said for a vast amount of other franchises, if not all, no doubt. But it is one wonderful convenience, is it not? Mixed bag, alright. As much as that's sarcasm, there are different ways to consume a media, as little or as much as people interact with it. I will emphasize that conducting this forum and summarizing its results is by no means meant to be an attempt to accurately represent the Guilty Gear community as a whole. This was not intended to be any sort of formalized science. What you can learn from the summary responses isn't taken from plot points on a graph or yes or no answers, but rather by the unified or varied positions of respondents. It would be difficult to claim absolute validity for a forum only really run through social media, with an emphasis on subjectivity over objectivity, after all. Take it less as a formal report, but more as general insight into the community of people who play, read, write for, and observe the franchise. There is no other Discord nor Harmony that can come close to replicating it.
Rock and roll, rock hard.